You will burn. 7-year-old boy sentenced to death for killing his stepmother. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from respect. This was the silence of disbelief. At the defense table sat a boy, 7 years old. His legs didn't reach the floor. His oversized glasses kept sliding down his nose, and every few seconds he pushed them back up with a small, careful hand. His name was Eli Harper, and he had just been found guilty of murder. The judge, a woman in her 60s with graying hair and tired eyes, looked down at the paperwork in front of her. She didn't look at Eli. No one did. Not directly. It was as if looking at him might confirm something too terrible to accept. Eli Harper, the judge said, her voice flat, drained. You have been found culpable in the death of Danielle Harper. Due to your age, you will be remanded to a state juvenile psychiatric facility until further evaluation. There was no gasping, no shouting. The crowd had already made up their minds weeks ago. Outside the courthouse, protesters held signs. Some read justice. For Danielle, others were harsher. Evil has no age. One woman held a poster with Eli's school photo, his face circled in red, the word monster scrawled beneath it. Inside, Eli's father sat 2 rows behind the defense table. Greg Harper, 41 years old, respected prosecutor, pillar of the eye. Community. His face was stone. He didn't cry, he didn't move. He just stared straight ahead, jaw tight, hands folded in his lap. When the judge's gavel finally fell, it sounded like a gunshot. Eli flinched. His lawyer, a young public defender named Aaron Moss, leaned down and whispered something to him. Eli nodded but didn't speak. He hadn't spoken much since that night. The night Danielle Harper died. The night she burned. Danielle Harper had been 33 years old, a nurse, kind, soft-spoken. She had only been married to Greg for 18 months. She'd tried so hard to connect with Eli, her new stepson, tried to be patient, tried to love him. And then, one cold November night, she was found dead in the guest room of their home. The door had been locked from the outside. The room was engulfed in flames. By the time the fire department arrived, there was nothing left to save. Eli had been the only one home. The prosecution's case was simple, damning. Eli had been playing with matches. He'd started the fire by accident, and when he realized what he'd done, he panicked. He locked the door. He ran. They said he didn't understand the weight of his actions, but they also said he showed no remorse. A child psychologist testified that Eli exhibited troubling detachment. A fire investigator confirmed that accelerant had been used. A neighbor claimed she'd seen Eli standing in the yard, watching the house burn, expressionless. And then there was the confession. A video played in court. Grainy. Recorded at the police station hours after the fire. Eli, small and shaking, sitting across from 2 detectives. His father wasn't in the room yet. No lawyer either. One of the detectives leaned forward. Eli, did you start the fire? A long pause, then barely audible. I think so. You think so or you know? Another pause. Eli's eyes were down. His voice cracked. I don't know. Maybe. I'm sorry. The video went viral. Millions of views. The caption, he confessed. But if you watched it closely, really closely, you'd see something else. You'd see a child who wasn't sure what he was confessing to. You'd see fear, confusion, a desperate need to say the right thing. You'd see a boy trying to survive. As the guards led Eli out of the courtroom, his father finally stood. For a moment, their eyes met. Greg's expression didn't change. He didn't reach out. He didn't say a word. Eli looked away first. The heavy doors closed behind them with a hollow thud. The crowd outside erupted. Chants, cheers, anger released like steam from a valve. Inside, one person remained seated long after everyone else had gone. Her name was Margot Feller, 47, former detective, now a private investigator hired by a legal advocacy group. She'd been watching the trial for weeks, taking notes, watching faces, listening not just to what was said, but to what wasn't. She flipped through her notebook, stopped on one page, a single line underlined twice. The door was locked from the outside, but Eli is too short to reach the latch. Margot closed the notebook, stood, adjusted her coat, and walked out into the cold. Because this case wasn't over. It had only just begun. 6 months earlier. Spring had come to Riverside, Indiana, and with it, a kind of fragile hope. The Harper house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. Neat lawn, white shutters, a wooden swing hanging from the oak tree in the front yard. From the outside, it looked like the kind of place where nothing bad could ever happen. Inside, Danielle Harper stood at the kitchen counter, packing a lunch. She was careful, methodical, turkey sandwich, no crust, apple slices in a small container, a juice box, a note on a napkin that read, "Have a great day. D." She folded the napkin carefully and tucked it into the lunchbox. Eli appeared in the doorway, small for his age, dark hair that stuck up. In the back, no matter how much she tried to smooth it down. He wore his backpack already, straps pulled tight over his narrow shoulders. "Morning," Danielle said, smiling. "Ready for school?" Eli nodded but didn't smile back. He rarely did. "I made your lunch," she said, holding up the bag. "Your favorite?" He took it without a word, set it down on the table, stared at it. Danielle's smile faltered just a little. She'd been trying for over a year now. Small gestures, gentle words, patience. But Eli kept her at arm's length, always polite, never warm. "Your dad's already at work," she said, softly. "Big case this week." Eli nodded again. She wanted to reach out, ruffle his hair, ask him how he slept. But she'd learned not to push. Eli didn't like to be touched, didn't like questions he wasn't ready to answer. So instead she just said, "Let's get you to school." Greg Harper had been a widower when he met Danielle. Eli's mother had died when the boy was 3. Cancer, fast and brutal. Greg had raised Eli alone for 2 years before Danielle came into their lives. She'd been a nurse at the hospital where Greg's mother had been treated for pneumonia. They'd talked in the waiting. So, coffee in the cafeteria, dinner a week later. Greg was charming, confident, steady, everything Danielle thought she wanted. And Eli? He'd seemed fine with it. Quiet, yes, reserved, but not hostile. "He just needs time," Greg had said. "He's not used to sharing me." Danielle had believed him. She'd moved in after the wedding, slowly redecorated, added soft touches, throw pillows, framed photos, a candle on the mantel that smelled like vanilla. But Eli's room stayed the same. Bare walls, a single bookshelf, a bed with a blue comforter that he made every morning, corners tight, military precise. "He likes order," Greg explained. "Structure, it makes him feel safe." Danielle didn't argue. She wanted Eli to feel safe. She wanted him to love her. That afternoon, Danielle picked Eli up from school. He climbed into the back seat without a word, buckled himself in, and stared out. The window. "How was your day?" she asked, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "Fine. Did you eat your lunch?" "Yes." "Did you like the note?" Eli didn't answer. Danielle bit her lip, turned her eyes back to the road. When they got home, Eli went straight to his room, closed the door. Danielle stood in the hallway for a moment, listening. No sounds, no music, no toys, just silence. She sighed and went downstairs. That night, Greg came home late. Again. He loosened his tie, kissed Danielle on the cheek, and poured himself a glass of whiskey. "Long day?" she asked. "You have no idea." She sat across from him at the kitchen table, watched him drink, waited. Finally, she said, "I'm worried about Eli." Greg looked up. "Why?" "He barely talks to me. He won't let me in. I don't know what I'm doing wrong." Greg set down his glass. His expression softened, but only slightly. "You're not." doing anything wrong. He's just adjusting. It's been over a year, Greg. He's a complicated kid. He's 7. Greg's jaw tightened. I know how old my son is. Danielle looked away. She hated when he did that. Shut her down, made her feel like she was overstepping. I'm just trying to help, she said quietly. I know. Greg reached across the table, took her hand, and I appreciate it. But Eli and we have our own rhythm. He'll come around. Just give him space. Danielle wanted to believe him, but something in Greg's voice made her uneasy. Later that night, after Greg had gone to bed, Danielle stood outside Eli's room. The door was cracked open just an inch. She could see him inside, sitting on the floor, legs crossed, staring at a book. She knocked softly. Eli. He looked up. Can I come in? He hesitated, then nodded. Danielle stepped inside, sat down on the edge of his bed. What are you reading? He held up the book. The Illustrated Guide to Aircraft. You like planes? She asked. I like how they work. She smiled. Maybe we could go to an air show sometime. Would you like that? Eli looked at her for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. Then, quietly, said, My mom used to say that too. Danielle's heart sank. I'm not trying to replace her, she said gently. I just want us to be friends. Eli looked back down at his book. Okay, he said, but he didn't sound convinced. As Danielle closed the door behind her and walked back to her room, she didn't notice the way Eli's hands trembled as he turned the page. She didn't see the way he stared at the wall, unblinking, for 20 minutes straight. And she didn't hear the whisper he let slip into the dark. I'm sorry. November 14th, 11:47 p.m. The 911 call came in at 11:52. The voice on the air line was a neighbor, frantic, breathless. There's a fire, the Harper house. Oh my God, it's someone's inside. I can see the flames from my window. The dispatcher tried to keep her calm. Ma'am, do you know if anyone is home? I don't know. I think so. Please send someone. By the time the first fire truck arrived, the guest room on the second floor was fully engulfed. Smoke poured from the broken window. Flames licked at the roof. Firefighters broke down the front door, rushed inside. What they found would haunt them for years. The guest room door was locked from the outside. It took them precious seconds to force it open. By then, the heat was unbearable, the smoke toxic. They found her near the window, collapsed on the floor. Danielle Harper. She'd tried to escape, tried to break the glass. Her hands were burned. Her body curled in on itself, a last desperate attempt to protect her lungs from the smoke. She'd been alive when the fire started. The medical examiner would later confirm cause of death was smoke inhalation. But the burns were severe, 3rd degree, the kind that told a story of suffering. The fire had started in the corner of the room, near a small wooden chair. Accelerant was detected. Gasoline. Someone had poured it deliberately. And the door had been locked with a simple barrel bolt, the kind you slide into place from the hallway, the kind a child could reach if they stood on their toes. Eli was found 20 minutes later. He was sitting in the backyard, on the grass, knees pulled up to his chest, staring at nothing. A firefighter approached him carefully. Hey buddy, you okay? Eli didn't respond. What's your name? Eli. Eli, do you live here? A nod. Is anyone else inside? Eli's face didn't change. No tears, no panic, just a blank, distant stare. She was in the room, he said quietly. Who was? Danielle. The firefighter's stomach dropped. Is she still in there? Eli nodded again. Why didn't you call for help? Eli looked down at his hands. They were clean, no soot, no burns. I didn't know what to do. Greg Harper arrived 30 minutes later. He'd been at the office, he said, working late. A colleague confirmed it, said Greg had been there until just after 11. When Greg saw the house, he stopped in his tracks. His face went pale. Then he ran. Danielle, he shouted. Danielle! Two, officers held him back. "Sir, you can't go in there. My wife is in there. Sir, the fire department is handling it. Let me go." It took 3 men to restrain him. He collapsed onto the lawn, head in his hands, sobbing. Eli watched from the back of a police car. He didn't move, didn't cry. He just watched. The lead investigator was a man named Detective Paul Rains, 56, veteran of the Riverside PD. He'd seen a lot in his career, but this was different. He crouched down next to Eli in the back of the car, spoke gently. "Eli, I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay?" Eli nodded. "Where were you when the fire started?" "In my room." "Did you see anything? Hear anything?" Eli hesitated. "I heard her scream." Rains felt his chest tighten. "And what did you do?" "I went to check." "And?" "The door was locked." "You couldn't open it?" Eli shook his head. "Did you try?" A pause, then, "I don't remember." Rains studied the boy's face. No tears, no trembling, just nothing. "Eli, do you know how the fire started?" Eli looked down at his lap, his small hands twisted together. "I think I did it," he whispered. Rains froze. "What do you mean?" "I was playing with matches. Earlier, in the hallway. I thought I put them all out, but maybe I didn't." "Where did you get the matches?" "From the kitchen drawer." "And you were playing with them?" "Why?" Eli's voice got smaller. "I don't know. I just wanted to see the fire." Rains leaned back. His mind was racing. A 7-year-old, matches, accelerant detected. A locked door. "Eli," he said slowly, "did you lock the door?" Eli looked up. His eyes were wide, confused. "I don't know," he said. "I don't remember." Greg was allowed to see his son an hour later. He knelt down in front of Eli, gripped his shoulders. "Are you hurt?" Greg asked, his voice hoarse. Eli shook his head. "Did they ask you questions?" Eli nodded. "What did you tell them?" Eli's lip trembled. For the first time that night, emotion cracked through. "I told them the truth," he whispered. Greg's face went hard. "What?" "Truth? That I started the fire." Greg stared at him. For a long, terrible moment he said nothing. Then he pulled Eli into his arms, held him tight. "It's going to be okay," Greg said quietly. "I'll fix this, I promise." But over Eli's shoulder, Greg's expression was unreadable. Cold, calculating. By morning, the story had already spread. Prosecutor's son confesses to killing stepmother in house fire. The media descended like locusts. Cameras, reporters, microphones shoved in faces. Danielle's body was removed from the house in a black bag. Neighbors stood on their lawns, whispering, crying, pointing. And in the back of a police car, still wearing his pajamas, Eli Harper sat in silence. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew, somehow, that nothing would ever be the same. The interrogation room was small, gray walls, a metal table, 2 chairs. Eli sat in one of them, feet dangling above the floor. He'd been there for 3 hours. No food, no water, no father. Detective Rains sat across from him. Another detective, a woman named Lisa Ortiz, stood near the door. She looked uncomfortable. "Eli," Rains said, his voice gentle but firm, "I need you to tell me again how did the fire start?" Eli stared at the table. His glasses had slipped down again. He didn't push them up. "I already told you." "I know, but I need to hear it one more time." Eli's hands were shaking now. I was playing with matches." "Where?" "In the hallway, upstairs." "And then what happened?" "I don't know. I thought I put them out." "But you didn't?" Eli's voice cracked. "I guess not." Rains leaned forward. "Eli, did you lock the door to the guest room?" I don't remember." "Think hard. It's important." Eli squeezed his eyes shut. Tears leaked out. "Maybe. I don't know. I'm sorry." "Why would you lock it, Eli?" "I don't know." "Were you angry at Danielle?" No. Did she do something to upset you? No, I didn't mean to. His voice broke completely. He buried his face in his hands. Rains glanced at Ortiz. She shook her head slightly. This didn't feel right. But Rains pressed on. Eli, I need you to say it clearly. Did you start the fire? A long, agonizing silence. Then, barely audible. Yes. The video was leaked within 24 hours. It went viral immediately. Millions of views. Shared, dissected, replayed. The caption read, 7-year-old confesses to murder. News outlets picked it up. Pundits debated. Psychologists weighed in. The public was horrified, fascinated, hungry for more. A child, a killer, a monster. Greg Harper held a press conference 2 days later. He stood at a podium, face drawn, voice steady. My son is not a monster, he said. He's a confused, traumatized little boy who made a terrible mistake. He needs help, not hatred. But even as he spoke, the damage was done. Eli's face was everywhere. His school photo, his name, his age. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse. Signs held high. Justice for Danielle. No mercy for evil. And in a small cell at juvenile detention, Eli sat alone, staring at the wall. He didn't understand why everyone was so angry. He'd told them what they wanted to hear. Wasn't that enough? Her name was Rachel Korean, Danielle's younger sister. 30 years. Old. A teacher. She lived 2 hours away in Fort Wayne. She hadn't spoken to Danielle in 3 weeks before the fire. Now, sitting across from Margot Feller in a quiet coffee shop, Rachel's hands trembled around her mug. She called me, Rachel said, voice tight. 2 days before she died. Margot leaned forward. What did she say? Rachel's eyes filled with tears. She said she was scared. Of what? She wouldn't tell me exactly. Just that something felt wrong, that Greg was different, distant, cold. Did she say anything about Eli? Rachel hesitated. She loved that boy, tried so hard, but he never let her in. She said it was like he'd been taught not to trust her. Taught? Rachel nodded. Her words, not mine. Margot made a note. Did she mention wanting to leave? Rachel's face crumpled. Yes, she'd been saving money, looking at apartments. She was going to file for separation. Did Greg know? I don't think so, but Rachel paused. Danielle said she found something. Something in Greg's office. She wouldn't tell me what, but she sounded terrified. Margot felt her pulse quicken. Did she take it? Whatever she found? I don't know. She said she'd call me back. She never did. The media had already painted Danielle as the victim, but that wasn't enough for them. They needed a narrative. Within days, the story shifted. Stepmother struggled to bond with disturbed child. Friends say Danielle Harper felt unsafe in her own home. Anonymous sources claimed Danielle had confided fears about Eli's behavior, that he'd been violent, destructive, that she'd begged Greg to get him help. None of it was true. Rachel tried to fight back, did interviews, spoke to reporters, but her voice was drowned out. The public had chosen their story. Eli was the monster. Danielle was the saint, and the truth didn't matter anymore. Rachel handed Margot a small envelope across the table. This came in the mail, a week after Danielle died. Margot opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph. Danielle and Eli at a park. Danielle smiling. Eli looking away. On the back, in Danielle's handwriting, "He's not broken, just scared." Margot stared at the words. Then she looked up at Rachel. "I need to see Greg Harper's office." Greg Harper's office was in downtown Riverside. Top floor, corner view, polished wood desk, framed diplomas on the wall. He was a man who projected control. Always had been. In court, he was relentless, sharp, unyielding. Juries loved him. Defense attorneys feared him. He had a conviction rate most prosecutors could only dream of. At home, he was different, quieter, reserved. but still, controlled. Margot sat across. From him now, notebook open. Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Harper. Greg nodded. His tie was perfectly knotted, his shirt crisp. Even in grief, he looked composed. Anything I can do to help? I'm reviewing the case. Just routine follow-up. Of course. Margot studied him. You were at the office the night of the fire? Yes. Working late? A case I'm preparing. A colleague saw me there until after 11. And you came straight home after? As soon as I got the call. Margot nodded. How was your relationship with Danielle? Greg's jaw tightened just slightly. We were happy. No problems? Every marriage has challenges. What kind of challenges? Greg's eyes flickered. Adjusting, blending a family, normal things. Did Danielle ever express fear? Of Eli? Greg's face hardened. No, never. She loved him. Did Eli love her? A pause, longer than it should have been. He was adjusting. That evening, Greg returned home to an empty house. The guest room door was sealed with police tape. The smell of smoke still lingered. He poured himself a drink, stood at the window, looked out at the darkening street. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Greg stared at it, then deleted it. He finished his drink, poured another. The next morning, Greg held a press conference. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Greg stood at the podium, eyes red, voice steady. My son is not a murderer, he said. He's a child, a frightened, confused child, and I will fight for him with everything I have. The crowd erupted. Do you believe he's innocent? Greg paused. The pause stretched too long. I believe, he said carefully, that my son needs help, not condemnation. It was a politician's answer, and Margot, watching from the back of the room, noticed. He hadn't said yes. Margot stood in the hallway outside the sealed guest room. The house was empty. Greg had gone back to work. Eli was still in custody. She'd gotten permission from the court to review the scene. Barely. She pulled on gloves, broke the seal, pushed open the door. The smell hit her first. Charred wood, melted plastic. Death. The walls were blackened, the windows shattered, the furniture reduced to skeletal frames, but Margot wasn't looking at the damage. She was looking at the door. The barrel bolt was still there, mounted on the outside, exactly 4 feet off the ground. Margot stood on her toes. She could barely reach it. Eli was 3'9". She pulled out her phone, took photos, measurements. Then she moved to the corner where the fire had started. Scorch marks, heavy concentration of accelerant. The fire investigator's report said, gasoline. But something felt off. Margot knelt down, studied the floor. Then she saw it, a small melted object, wedged between the floorboards. She carefully extracted it, held it up to the light. A key, not a house key. Smaller, like a diary key, or a lockbox. She bagged it. Downstairs, Margot went through the rest of the house. Kitchen drawers, closets, Greg's office. Everything was immaculate, too clean, like someone had scrubbed away evidence. She found Eli's room, opened the door carefully. It was exactly as Rachel had described, bare, organized, almost military in its precision. On the desk sat a notebook. Margot flipped through it. Math homework, book reports, drawings of airplanes. Then, on the last page, something different. A drawing, crude, childish, but unmistakable. A stick figure standing outside a door, flames inside, another figure at the window, and written beneath it in Eli's careful handwriting, I'm sorry I couldn't help. Margot stared at it. Not, I'm sorry I did it. I'm sorry I couldn't help. That night, Margot returned to her office, spread out everything she had, photos, reports, notes, the key. She called the fire investigator, a man named Tom Briggs. Tom, the accelerant. You're sure it was gasoline? Positive, why? Where would a 7-year-old get gasoline? A pause. The garage, I guess. Most people keep it for lawnmowers. Did you check the Harper garage? Yeah, there was a can there, half empty. Prints? Wiped clean. Margot's stomach sank. A 7-year-old wiped down a gas can? Silence on the other end. Tom? I flagged it in my report, he said quietly, but the DA's office said it wasn't relevant. Margot hung up, sat back in her chair, stared at the evidence board she'd been building, and for the first time, she felt certain. Eli Harper didn't kill Danielle. Someone wanted everyone to think he did. The case exploded. Within a week, Eli Harper's face was on every news channel. His name trended on social media. Hashtags formed. Justice for Danielle. Eli Harper trial. Child monster. Podcasts dissected. Every detail. YouTube channels analyzed the confession video frame by frame. Amateur detectives on Reddit built theories. And the people of Riverside, they made up their minds. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered daily. Hundreds of them. Signs, chants, candles for Danielle. One woman held a poster-sized photo of Eli's school picture. She'd drawn devil horns on it in red marker. "Evil has no age," she screamed into a megaphone. The crowd roared in agreement. Inside, the judge reviewed the case. Eli's public defender, Aaron Moss, fought for his client, but the pressure was suffocating. "Your Honor," Aaron argued, "my client is 7 years old. The confession was coerced. He had no parent present, no lawyer. He was interrogated for hours." The prosecutor, a woman named Linda Graves, stood. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. The defendant confessed. Multiple times. He had means, motive, and opportunity." "What motive?" Aaron shot back. "He's a child. A disturbed child with documented behavioral issues." "That's not true. He set fires before. His school records show one incident. A candle in art class, supervised." The judge raised her hand. Silence fell. "I'll review." "The psychiatric evaluation," she said. "Until then, the defendant remains in custody." That night, the news ran a special segment. The boy who burned his stepmother. What went wrong? They interviewed neighbors, teachers, a child psychologist who'd never met Eli but had opinions anyway. Children. "This age don't typically exhibit psychopathic tendencies," the psychologist said. "But in rare cases, severe trauma can create detachment, lack of empathy, dangerous behavior." "Are you saying Eli Harper is a psychopath?" "I'm saying the warning signs were there." The host nodded gravely. Cut 2. Commercial. At the juvenile detention center, Eli sat on his bunk, alone. The other kids avoided him. Even the guards looked at him differently. A therapist visited twice a week, a kind woman named Dr. Sharon Mills. "Eli," she said gently, "do you understand why you're here?" Eli nodded. "Can you tell me?" "Because I hurt Danielle." "Do you remember doing it?" Eli's face scrunched up. I think so." "You think so? Or you know?" His hands twisted together. "They said I did, so I must have." Dr. Mills leaned forward. "Eli, what do you remember?" Eli looked up. His eyes were red, exhausted. "I remember the fire, and her screaming, and I tried the door, but it was locked." "Who locked it?" "I don't know." "Was it you?" Eli's voice dropped to a whisper. "They said it was." "But do you remember locking it?" A long, terrible silence. Then, "No." Dr. Mills left the session shaken. She wrote, In her notes, "Patient shows signs of extreme suggestibility. Answers change based on phrasing of questions. No clear memory of events. Possible false confession under duress." She submitted the report. It was buried, because by then the public had already decided. Eli Harper was guilty, and nothing, no evidence, no doubt, no truth, was going to change their minds. Dr. Sharon Mills sat across from Margot Feller in a small coffee shop, her hands wrapped around a tea she hadn't touched. "I shouldn't be talking to you," Dr. Mills said quietly. "But you are," Margot replied. "Because something's wrong." Dr. Mills nodded. "Everything's wrong. She pulled a folder from her bag, slid it across the table. This is my full evaluation. Not the summary they filed with the court, the real one. Margot opened it, scanned the pages. Subject exhibits above average intelligence, IQ testing. Places him in the 93rd percentile. However, emotional regulation is significantly impaired. Severe anxiety, hypervigilance, symptoms consistent with chronic psychological stress. No indicators of conduct disorder. No history of cruelty to animals. No pattern of deceit or manipulation. Notable. Subject's response is highly dependent on question phrasing. Repeatedly seeks approval. Answers shift to match perceived expectation. Margot looked up. This doesn't describe a killer. No, Dr. Mills said. It describes a traumatized child. Traumatized by what? Dr. Mills leaned forward. That's, what I can't figure out. His mother died when he was 3. But there's something else. Something more recent. The fire? Before the fire. Dr. Mills tapped the report. I asked him to draw his family. Standard projective test. She pulled out a drawing, crude, childish. 3 stick figures, 1 labeled me, 1 labeled Dad, 1 labeled Danielle. But Danielle was off to the side, separated, smaller, and between Eli and his father, Dr. Mills pointed. Look at this. Eli had drawn a line, connecting them, but not touching Danielle. He doesn't see her as part of the unit, Dr. Mills explained. He sees her as outside, excluded, or excluded by someone. Margot felt her chest tighten. You think the father isolated her? Dr. Mills didn't answer directly. I think Eli was taught to keep his distance, and I think he's protecting someone. Who? Dr. Mills met her eyes. The person he loves most in the world. Later that day, Margot reviewed the interview transcripts again. One exchange stood out. Detective Rains. Eli, why didn't you try to save Danielle? Eli, I wanted to. Rains, but you didn't. Eli, I couldn't. The door was locked. Rains, you locked it. Eli. Long. Pause. Did I? Rains, you tell me. Eli, I don't remember. Rains, but it's possible? Eli, I guess. Margot circled the exchange, wrote in the margin. He's not confessing. He's asking for permission to confess. She called Aaron Moss. I need you to get Eli back on the stand, she said. The trial's almost over. The judge won't. Then file a motion, new evidence, psychological coercion, whatever it takes. Aaron hesitated. What do you have? Proof that he's lying. Why would a kid lie about killing someone? Margot's voice went cold. Because someone told him to. Her name was Claire Dutton. 62. Retired librarian. Lived 3 houses down from the Harpers. She'd given a statement to police the night of the fire, but it had been filed away, forgotten, until Margot found it. Margot sat across from Claire in her living room. The woman's hands shook as she poured tea. I told them, Claire said. I told them what I saw, but no one seemed to care. Tell me, Margot said gently. Claire took a breath. I couldn't sleep that night. Insomnia. I was sitting by my window, reading. Around 11:30, I saw a car pull into the Harper driveway. Margot leaned forward. What kind of car? Greg's, the black sedan. He parked, sat there for a few minutes, then he went inside. You're sure it was 11:30? Positive. I checked the clock. Margot's pulse quickened. Greg had said he didn't get home until after the fire started, after the 911 call. What happened? Next, I went back to my book. Maybe 10 minutes later, I heard shouting. A woman's voice. I looked out again and saw movement upstairs. Shadows in the window. Which window? The guest room. Margot felt ice in her veins. And then? Then I saw smoke. It happened so fast. I called 911, but by the time I looked back outside, Claire's voice wavered. I saw Eli standing in the yard, just standing there, and Greg was with him. Greg was outside? With Eli? Claire nodded. He had his hand on the boy's shoulder. They were just watching. Margot's mind raced. Did you tell the police this? Yes, that same night. But when I gave my official statement later, the officer seemed uninterested. He said my timeline didn't match the other evidence. What other evidence? Greg's alibi. His colleague confirmed he was at the office until 11:15. Margot stood, paced. Mrs. Dutton, would you be willing to testify? Claire's face paled. I don't want trouble. A child's life is at stake. Claire looked down at her hands, then nodded slowly. I'll do it. Margot immediately contacted Aaron Moss. I have a witness who puts Greg at the house 30 minutes before the fire. Before his supposed alibi checks out. Aaron's voice sharpened. Are you sure? Positive, and there's more. She saw Greg and Eli together in the yard before the fire trucks arrived. That contradicts everything. Exactly. Aaron was silent for a moment. If this is true, if Greg was there, then Eli didn't act alone. Margot finished. Or at all. That night, Margot sat in her office, staring at her evidence board. Photos, timelines, statements. She drew a new line, connecting Greg to the house, 30 minutes earlier than he claimed. Then another line, from Greg to the locked door. And finally, one more, from Greg to Eli's confession. The pattern was forming, but she still didn't have proof. Not yet. The courtroom was packed. Aaron Moss stood before the judge, a stack of papers in his hand. Your Honor, I'm filing a motion to present new evidence. A witness who directly contradicts the prosecution's timeline. Linda Graves shot to her feet. Objection. The witness list was finalized weeks ago. This witness came forward after the trial began. Aaron countered. She was interviewed by police, but her statement was ignored. The judge frowned. Ignored? Yes, Your Honor. Deliberately overlooked because it didn't fit the narrative. Graves scoffed. That's a serious accusation. And I have documentation to back it up. The judge considered. I'll allow it. But Mr. Moss, this better be worth my time. Claire Dutton took the stand the next morning. She looked small in the witness box, nervous but determined. Aaron approached gently. Mrs. Dutton, can you tell the court what you saw the night of November 14th? Claire glanced at Greg. He sat stone-faced in the gallery. I saw Mr. Harper arrive home at 11:30, she said clearly. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. You're certain of the time? Yes, I checked my clock. And what did you see next? I heard shouting, a woman's voice. Then I saw smoke. Did you see Eli Harper? Yes, he was in the yard, with his father, before the fire trucks arrived. Graves stood immediately. Objection. The witness's timeline contradicts verified phone records and witness testimony from Mr. Harper's colleague. Aaron turned to her. Then perhaps Mr. Harper's alibi needs to be re-examined. The judge banged her gavel. Counselors, approach. At the bench, voices were low but heated. This witness is unreliable, Graves hissed. She's elderly, it was dark, she could be confused. Or she's telling the truth, Aaron shot back, and your case just fell apart. The judge looked between them. I'm ordering an independent review of Mr. Harper's alibi. And the phone records from that night. Court is adjourned until further notice. Outside, reporters swarmed. Greg Harper pushed through the crowd, head down, no comment. But Margot saw his face, and for the first time since this began, Greg Harper looked afraid. That afternoon, a forensic analyst named Dr. Robert Chen was brought. He reviewed the fire evidence, the burn patterns, the accelerant distribution, and he found something the original investigator had missed. The pour pattern is inconsistent with a child's height, Dr. Chen explained. The accelerant was poured from at least 5 feet off the ground. Splatter. Marks on the wall confirm it. Aaron looked up sharply. How tall is Eli Harper? 3'9". And the splatter marks? 5'2", minimum. Silence fell over the courtroom. Your Honor, Aaron said, voice steady but forceful. A child that small could not have poured the accelerant in. This pattern, physically impossible. Graves stood. Her face was tight. The child could have stood on something. There was nothing in the room to stand on, Dr. Chen said flatly. I checked. The judge leaned back, removed her glasses, rubbed her eyes. This trial, she said slowly, is beginning to look like a mistake. That night, Greg Harper sat alone in his office. His phone buzzed, a blocked number. He answered. You need to stop this. A woman's voice, familiar. I can't, Greg said quietly. It's out of my hands now. Then you know what happens next. The line went dead. Greg stared at the phone. Then he opened his desk drawer, pulled out a small recorder, and pressed play. Margot sat across from Greg's colleague, a junior prosecutor named Nathan Wells, 28, ambitious, nervous. You said Greg was at the office until after 11:15, Margot said. Nathan nodded. That's right. You saw him? Yes, we were both working late, prepping cases. What time did you leave? Around 11:20. And Greg was still there? Yes. Margot leaned forward. Nathan, when exactly did you last see Greg that night? Nathan shifted. I don't know, maybe 11? 11:10? So not 11:15. Around then. Around isn't exact. A witness puts Greg at his house at 11:30. That's a 10-minute drive, which means he would have left the office by 11:20. Were you still there then? Nathan's face paled. I think so. You think so, or you... No? Silence. Margot softened her voice. Nathan, did Greg ask you to confirm his alibi? Nathan looked down. His hands trembled. He's my boss, he whispered. He said it was important, that he needed me to back him up. I didn't think... You lied. I didn't know about the fire yet. He just said if anyone asked, tell them he was there until after 11:15. Margot felt her stomach turn. When did he ask you this? 2 days after the fire, before I gave my official statement. And you said yes. Nathan's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was helping him. I didn't know his wife was dead. I didn't know. You knew, Margot said coldly. You just didn't care. The revelation broke that evening. Prosecutor's alibi fabricated. Colleague admits to lying under pressure. The media erupted. Nathan Wells resigned immediately. Greg Harper was called back to the stand. He sat. In the witness box, composed but visibly strained. Linda Graves questioned him carefully. Mr. Harper, can you explain the discrepancy in your timeline? I may have been mistaken about the exact time I left the office, Greg said smoothly. It was a traumatic night. My memory isn't perfect. But you told police you arrived home after the fire started. I believed that to be true, even though a witness saw you there 30 minutes earlier? Greg's jaw tightened. The witness is mistaken. Or you're lying, Aaron said, standing. Your Honor, Mr. Harper has motive, means, and opportunity. His marriage was failing. His wife wanted to leave. And now his alibi has collapsed. Graves shot up. Objection. There's no evidence of motive. Danielle was planning to file for separation, Aaron continued. She'd been saving money. She'd confided in her sister. And 2 days before she died, she found something in Greg's office, something that scared her. The courtroom exploded. The judge banged her gavel. Order. Greg's face had gone white. What did she find, Mr. Harper? Aaron pressed. What was worth killing for? I didn't kill my wife. Then who did? Greg's eyes flickered to Eli, sitting small and silent at the defense table. And for just a moment something passed across his face. Regret or calculation. It was impossible to tell. That night, Margot received an anonymous email. No text. Just an attachment. A scanned document. A bank statement. Greg Harper's name. An account. Danielle wouldn't have known about. Deposits, large ones, from a shell company and withdrawals, all made in the weeks before Danielle's death. Margot stared at the screen. Then she picked up her phone. Aaron, she said, I know why Danielle wanted to leave. The device was small. A baby monitor. Camera. One of those modern ones with cloud storage and motion detection. Margot found it buried in a box of Danielle's belongings, items the police had returned to Rachel after the investigation, things they deemed irrelevant. Rachel hadn't even opened the box until Margot asked. She kept it in the guest room, Rachel said. Said she wanted to keep an eye on things when Greg worked late. She never told me why. Margot turned the device over in her hands. Does it still work? I don't know. The account might still be active. It took Margot 3 hours and a tech specialist to access the cloud storage, and when the files loaded, her blood ran cold. The first video was dated November 7th, 1 week before the fire. The guest room, daytime. Danielle sitting on the bed, folding laundry. The door opened. Greg stepped in. His voice was calm, too calm. We need to talk. Danielle looked up. About what? About you snooping through my office. Her face tightened. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for the insurance papers and I found... Found what, Danielle? You know what? Greg closed the door, moved closer. What you found is none of your business. None of my business. Her voice rose. You're taking money, dirty money, and you're using our home. Lower your voice. Don't tell me to lower my voice. I could lose everything because of you. You won't lose anything if you keep your mouth shut. Danielle stood. I'm not keeping quiet about this, Greg. I'm done. Done? I'm leaving. I've already talked to a lawyer. Greg's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped. You're not going anywhere. Watch me. If you leave, I'll make sure you never see a dime. I'll destroy you. I don't care about your money. No? Greg stepped closer. What about Eli? Danielle froze. What about him? If you leave, I'll make sure everyone knows you abandoned him, that you couldn't handle being a mother, that you were cruel to him. That's not true. Doesn't matter. I'm a prosecutor, Danielle. I know how to build a story, and people will believe me. Her eyes filled with tears. You wouldn't. Try me. The video ended. Margot's hands shook as she opened the next file. November 12th, 2 days before the fire, same room, evening. The light was dim. Greg entered. This time he wasn't alone. Eli stood beside him, small and quiet. Come here, buddy, Greg said gently. He guided Eli to sit on the bed. Dad, I don't want to. It's okay. I just need to talk to you about something important. Eli looked up at him, trusting, obedient. Greg knelt down, put his hands on Eli's shoulders. Eli, do you remember when Mom died? Eli nodded. And do you remember how sad we were? How hard it was? Another nod. Well, sometimes people leave us, and it hurts. But we have to be strong. You and me. We're a team, right? Right. And teams protect each other. Okay. Greg's voice softened. Danielle might leave us, Eli. She might go away. And if she does, people are going to ask you questions. About her, about us, about whether she was a good mom. Eli's face scrunched up. But she's nice. I know, buddy. But sometimes nice people do bad things. And if anyone asks, I need you to tell them the truth. That she wasn't always nice. That sometimes she scared you. But she didn't. Eli. Greg's grip tightened, just slightly. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Eli hesitated, then nodded. Good boy. The video ended. Margot sat back. Her chest was tight, her hands clenched into fists. He was planting the narrative, preparing. Glide to lie, preparing him to be the scapegoat. But there was one more file. November 14th, the night of the fire. Margot almost didn't want to open it, but she had to. The timestamp read 11:34 p.m., the guest room. Danielle was inside packing a bag, moving quickly. Her face was streaked with tears. The door opened. Greg stepped in. Going somewhere? Danielle spun around. Stay away from me. You can't leave, Danielle. Watch me. I told you what would happen if you tried. I don't care anymore, Greg. I'm done being afraid of you. Greg moved closer. His voice was ice. You found my Cords, you know what that means. If you go to the authorities, I already did. Greg froze. I sent copies to a lawyer, Danielle said, voice shaking but firm. If anything happens to me, they go public. You lose everything. For a long moment, Greg said nothing. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small container, gasoline. Danielle's eyes went wide. Greg, don't. You should have stayed quiet. Greg, please. He poured it, fast, deliberate, across the floor, the bed, the curtains. Danielle backed toward the window. You're insane. No, I'm protecting my family. He pulled out a lighter. Greg, don't do this. Eli is downstairs. Eli will be fine. He's a smart boy. He'll understand. He's 7 years old. Greg flicked the lighter. The flame caught. Danielle screamed. Greg stepped out, closed the door, slid the bolt into place. Her screams grew louder. Desperate, she pounded on the door. Greg, please let me out, Greg! He stood there, listening, then he walked away. The video cut off. Margot sat in stunned silence. Then she grabbed her phone, called Aaron. I have it, she said, voice shaking. I have everything. But when she tried to access the file again to make a backup, the screen went blank. An error message appeared. File deleted remotely. Margot's heart stopped. Someone had been watching. Someone knew she'd found it, and they'd just erased the evidence. She tried recovery software, called the tech specialist back, spent hours trying to retrieve the file. Nothing. It was gone. Her only proof. The only thing that could save Eli and convict Greg. Deleted. Margot slumped in her chair, head in her hands. Then her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. You should have left it alone. Another buzz. A photo, her office, taken from outside. Through the window. Someone was watching her. Right now. Margot stood, looked out the window. The street was empty. But she knew. Greg Harper was smarter than she'd given him credit for. He'd covered his tracks, destroyed the evidence, and now he was threatening her. But Margot wasn't afraid. She'd seen the video. She knew the truth, and somehow she was going to prove it, even if it killed her. Aaron Moss paced in Margot's office, hands running through his hair. You're telling me the only evidence that could exonerate Eli is gone? Margot nodded grimly. Deleted remotely. Someone accessed the cloud account and wiped it. Greg. Has to be. He knew we were getting close. Aaron slammed his hand on the desk. Without that video, we have nothing. Circumstantial evidence, a shaky alibi, a coerced confession, but no smoking gun. We have my testimony. I saw it. Your testimony won't be enough. Not against a prosecutor with Greg's reputation. They'll tear you apart on cross, say you're biased, that you're making it up to save the kid. Margot's jaw tightened. Then we find another way. What other way? The trial's almost over. The judge is going to rule any day now. Then we need to make Greg slip, force his hand. Aaron looked at her. How? Margot pulled out her phone, showed him the threatening text, the photo of her office. He's scared, she said. Scared people make mistakes. We use that. That afternoon, they brought Eli back to the stand. The courtroom was silent as the small boy walked to the witness box. He looked even smaller than before, pale, exhausted. Aaron approached gently, spoke softly. Eli, I need to ask you something very important, and I need you to tell me the truth. Not what you think I want to hear, not what anyone told you to say, just the truth. Can you do that? Eli nodded. Did you start the fire? Eli's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. You don't know? Or you don't remember? I don't remember. But you said you did. You confessed. Because they said I did. Because my dad said... He stopped. His whole body went rigid. Aaron leaned closer. What did your dad say, Eli? Eli's voice was barely a whisper. He said, if anyone asked, I should say it was an accident, that I was playing with matches, that I didn't mean to. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. "Order," Aaron pressed on. "Did your dad tell you to lie?" "Objection!" Linda Graves shot to her feet. "Leading the witness overruled," the judge said sharply. "Answer the question, Eli." Eli looked out into the gallery, found his father's face. Greg stared back. His expression was unreadable, but Eli saw something there, something that made him shrink. "Eli," Aaron prompted. Eli's voice cracked. "He said it would be better, that people would understand, that it was an accident and I was just scared." "But it wasn't an accident, was it?" Tears streamed down Eli's face. "I didn't do it. I didn't start the fire, I swear. I tried to help her, but the door was locked and I couldn't reach and—" His words dissolved into sobs. Aaron turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this child has been manipulated, coerced into a false confession by the one person he trusted most." Graves stood. "This is speculation." "It's the truth," Aaron said. "And I have a witness who can corroborate it." He gestured to the back of the courtroom. The doors opened, and in walked someone no one expected, Nathan Wells. Nathan took the stand, hands shaking. "I lied about Greg's alibi," he said. "But that's not all." Aaron nodded. "Tell the court." Nathan took a breath. 2 days after the fire, Greg came to me. He asked me to confirm his timeline, but he also told me something else. He said if anyone questioned Eli's confession, I should say the boy had behavioral issues, that I'd seen him act out, be violent. "Had you?" "No, I'd never even met Eli. But Greg said it was important, that the case needed to be airtight. I didn't understand why until later." "And why is that?" Nathan looked directly at Greg. "Because he needed Eli to take the fall." The courtroom exploded again. Greg stood abruptly. "This is absurd." "Sit down, Mr. Harper," the judge ordered. But Greg didn't sit. His face was red, his composure finally cracking. "That boy killed my wife," he shouted. "He's disturbed. He needs help." "No," a voice called from the gallery. Everyone turned. Rachel Korean stood, Danielle's sister, tears streaming down her face. "That boy is innocent," she said. "And you know it." Security moved toward her, but the judge waved them off. "Ms. Korean," the judge said, "do you have something to add?" Rachel stepped forward, pulled an envelope from her purse. "Danielle sent me this, 3 days before she died. I didn't open it until yesterday. I was too afraid." She handed it to the bailiff. He brought it to the judge. The judge opened it, read. Her face went pale. "What is it?" Aaron asked. The judge looked up, directly at Greg. "It's a letter," she said slowly, "written by Danielle Harper, describing abuse, financial crimes, and a direct threat made by her husband." She read aloud, "If you're reading this, something has happened to me. Greg has threatened me. He's told me if I leave, he'll destroy me. He'll use Eli against me. He'll make sure no one believes me. I'm scared, but I won't stay silent anymore. The account. Numbers are attached. The evidence is clear. If I die, it wasn't an accident, and it wasn't Eli. Please protect that boy. He's innocent." Silence. Absolute. Deafening. Silence. Then Greg moved. Fast. Toward the exit. But security was faster. They tackled him before he reached the door, and as they dragged him back, Greg screamed. It was supposed to be clean. She wasn't supposed to fight. She wasn't supposed to. He stopped, realizing what he'd just admitted. The judge stood. Her voice was steel. "Gregory Harper, you are under arrest for the murder of Danielle Harper." Eli sat in the witness box staring. He didn't understand everything that had just happened, but he understood one thing. His father was being taken away. And for the first time in months, Eli felt like he could breathe. 3 months later, the charges against Eli Harper were dropped. Formally, publicly, with an apology. From the state. But apologies don't erase trauma. Eli was released into the care of his aunt, Rachel. She moved him out of Riverside, away from the cameras, The whispers, the stares. They settled in a quiet town 2 states over. A fresh start. Or as close to one as they could manage, but Eli didn't. Talk much, didn't smile. He went to therapy twice a week, drew pictures of airplanes, kept his room neat and organized. At night, he still woke up screaming, still saw the flames, still heard Danielle pounding on the door, still remembered standing in the yard, his father's hand heavy on his shoulder, whispering, "Don't say anything, just stay quiet, I'll handle this." Gregory Harper was convicted on all counts: first-degree murder, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, corruption. The trial was a media frenzy, every detail dissected: the bank accounts, the shell companies, the money he'd been skimming from seized assets in his cases. Danielle had found it all, and she was going to expose him, so he killed her, burned her alive, and framed his own son. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty. Greg showed no emotion as the verdict was read, just sat there, stone-faced, the way he always had. But when they let him out in cuffs, he looked back at the gallery one last time, looking for Eli. But Eli wasn't there. Margot Feller stood outside the courthouse, watching the crowds disperse. Reporters shouted questions at her. She ignored them all. She'd done what she set out to do. Found the truth. Freed an innocent child. But it didn't feel like victory, because the truth had come too late. Eli had spent months in custody, months being called a monster, months believing he was guilty. And even now, free and exonerated, the damage was done. The world had decided he was evil, and even though the world was wrong, the stain remained. Aaron Moss approached, hands in his pockets. "You okay?" Margot nodded. "You?" "I don't know. I keep thinking, what if we hadn't pushed? What if we'd just let it go? Then Eli would be in a psychiatric facility for the rest of his childhood, and Greg would still be free." "Yeah." Aaron looked out at the street. "Oh, but would people care?" Margot didn't answer. Because she knew the truth. Most people didn't care about the truth. They cared about the story, the narrative, the version that made them feel safe. A disturbed child who killed his stepmother. That was easy to understand, easy to contain. But a respected prosecutor who murdered his wife and framed his own son? That was terrifying. That meant the system failed. That meant people in power could lie, could manipulate, could destroy. And no one wanted to believe that. 6 months later, Margot received a letter. No return address. But she recognized the handwriting. Eli's. She opened it carefully. Inside was a drawing. Simple, childish, but clear. A house, not burning, just standing, whole. And in front of it, 2 stick figures. One labeled me, one labeled Aunt. Rachel. No fire, no flames, no locked doors, just a house. And a chance. At the bottom in careful letters, "Thank you." Margot folded the letter, put it in her desk drawer. And for the first time in months, she smiled. But the story didn't end there, because Riverside, Indiana didn't want to talk about what happened. The town that had demanded justice, that had protested, that had called a 7-year-old a monster. They didn't want to admit they were wrong. So they didn't. The narrative shifted quietly, subtly. Tragic case of parental manipulation. Father's mental breakdown leads to unthinkable crime. System works. Truth eventually prevails. They framed it as a success, a redemption story. But they never apologized to Eli, never admitted that they'd vilified an innocent child, that they'd screamed for his blood, that they'd celebrated his conviction. The signs came down. The protests stopped. The hashtags faded. And Riverside moved on. Because that's what people do. They forget. They revise. They rewrite. And the truth? The truth becomes whatever's convenient. On the 1-year anniversary of Danielle's death, Rachel took Eli to visit her grave. It was quiet, empty, just the 2 of them. Eli stood at the headstone, small hands holding a single white flower. "I'm sorry I couldn't help you," he whispered. Rachel knelt beside him, put her arm around his shoulders. "It wasn't your job to help her, sweetheart. You were just a little boy. But I knew something was wrong, and I didn't say anything. You were protecting yourself, that's not wrong." Eli looked up at her. "Is my dad ever going to say he's sorry?" Rachel's heart broke. "I don't know, honey. Maybe not." "Why?" "Because some people, they can't admit when they're wrong, even when it costs them everything." Eli nodded slowly, placed the flower on the grave. "I miss her," he said quietly. "I know. Me too." They stood there for a long time, silent, together. Then Eli took Rachel's hand. "Can we go home now?" "Yeah, baby, we can go home." The final scene played out in a maximum security prison. Gregory Harper sat in his cell, alone, isolated. He'd tried to appeal, claimed his confession was taken out of context, that he'd been overwhelmed, traumatized, not thinking clearly. It didn't work. He'd die in prison. Everyone knew it. And late at night, when the lights went out and the silence pressed in, Greg thought about Eli, about the boy he'd used, sacrificed, destroyed. And sometimes, just sometimes, he felt something. Not quite regret, not quite guilt, but close. He'd wanted to protect himself, his reputation, his life, and he'd burned everything to do it, including the one person who'd trusted him most, his son. Margot's final case notes ended with a single paragraph. "The truth appeared, but no one wanted to see it, because accepting that we were wrong, that we condemned an innocent child, would mean admitting our complicity, our cruelty, our cowardice. Lying requires tension, but believing a lie, sometimes that's just easier." She closed the file, turned off the light, and walked away, because some cases don't have happy endings. They just have endings. And the truth? The truth is what you make of it.